You're listening to the Minutes on Growth podcast, the show that brings you mindfully curated insights into relationships, spirituality, personal development, and everything in between, with your host, Tanaz Husseinpour. Hi, everyone. It's Tanaz Husseinpour, and welcome back to another episode of Minutes on Growth. Today, I have Pervis Taylor, award-winning celebrity life coach, speaker, and best-selling author with us. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you for being on. Okay, let's dive right in because I have so many questions. In your latest book, Surthrival Mode, you talk about your own struggles with abuse, with self-esteem, with depression, and how you use the 4 A's to transform your life. Can you tell us what are the 4 A's?
Yeah. The first A is acknowledgement, right? Which is very, very, very powerful because I always say, you go to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, the first thing that they do is say, my name is Pervis and I'm an alcoholic. So there's power in acknowledging that something's not working, right? Then the next A after acknowledgement is acceptance, which is very, very hard because acceptance almost feels like condoning, but it's not. It's just saying that it happened. And it happened, and that's it. Doesn't mean I condoned it, but it did happen. And the A after that is articulation, which is the part where we start to express and talk about what this thing did to us and how it's made us feel, how it's hurt us, and how it's formed us into who we are right now, like the articulation of it. And then lastly, alchemy, which is my favorite part, which is transforming all the things that we've been through into something greater, right? So turning the lead in our life into gold. And so that's what I did in my life, and I continue to do it. And it's an ongoing journey. So I want to make sure I say that it's an ongoing journey. It's not a one-time thing. It's something that you got to always engage in.
Wow, I love it. And it's so unique to hear that from a man because, traditionally men are not supposed to feel their feelings. They're definitely not supposed to be talking about their feelings. As kids, we hear this all the time, man up, boys don't cry. And I think it becomes so difficult for men to actually feel their emotions. And I was on your Instagram and you had this quote that I absolutely loved. And you said, men will good themselves into a deep depression. And again, in your book, you talk about, acknowledging your pain, accepting that pain, articulating, engaging, and transforming it.
Yeah.
And I think that's that is so profound. As a man, how were you able to get to a point where you're like, you know what? I'm going to feel my feelings.
Well, I think for me, I was suppressing so much. I'll never forget. I always share the story. I had anxiety so bad that it started to physically manifest in my body where my hair fell out. So I had patches of hair, chunks of hair that fell out. And it was due to the anxiety and not really dealing with what I was experiencing and going through. And at the time, my father died, and I was thinking about all the things that had happened to me that I had suppressed. And then I was acting and I was upset with my manager. So it was just all these things happening all at one time. And I said, once my hair fell out and it grew back, I said, I can never go through that again. I said, I will never go through that again. And so I said, you know what, Pervis, I don't care what people say about me. I don't care what the world says. I'm going to talk about what I'm feeling right now because it's too much. It was too much. And so having that extreme case of anxiety was kind of like the impetus for me getting into a space where I'm like, you know what? I'm going to talk about my emotion. I'm going to talk about what I'm feeling because that has to be better than the alternative, than what I just dealt with. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I broke out in highs. It was horrible. So I recognized that I have to talk about what it is and I'm experiencing. Otherwise, physically, I'll get sick.
Wow. And how did you first start talking about your experience? Did you have help? Did you, how to do that? That I think is the harder part.
So I read this book that my pastor gave, which was very forward thinking of him. He gave us this book called How People Grow. It is written by these Christian psychologists. And they talk about the power of confession. right? The power of saying what is going on and how it's so transformative. And reading that book, I was just like, oh my God, like it just messed up my mind in terms of like therapy, in terms of like relationships and things like that. So what I did was I found the book encourages you to find like one person that's a safe space for you, that you feel that's a safe space that's not gonna judge you no matter what you're experiencing. And I found that one person, and that's where it kind of snowballed effect. And I found him, and I was able to just unload and unleash everything that I was experiencing right now. And it was so freeing. It was literally like, at that point, like 27 years of weight were just immediately lifted off of me, and just telling somebody what I was going through. So I found that one person who I felt was a safe space.
Wow, amazing. I'm so glad you found that person and you were able to
I am too.
actually unload yourself. One of the things that I've noticed is that, some men want to feel their feelings and they want to talk about it, but they enter into this, fight or flight or freeze mode where they physically can't bring out their words. Did you ever experience something similar to that? Or have you met people who've experienced something similar to that? And what would your advice be?
I definitely experienced that because it was frightening. When you're treading new territory and you've only been accustomed to life being this way, you are going to panic. You are going to go into a state of either being frozen, fight or flight, as you stated. And I definitely have encountered a lot of men who have, had that similar experience. But I will say the thing that has been disarming for them, and especially in me working with them, is that I tell them about my story. So what it is I make them feel comfortable and letting them know that I am on the same journey as you. I just may have a little bit more tools in my toolbox than you do, but I've experienced some of the pain that you've experienced, and I know how to speak their language because I'm a man, obviously. So like I level the playing field immediately. So if you are in a space, I guess the advice would be being able to identify who's a safe space for you, who you feel that you can be vulnerable around. Because I tell women this all the time. I say, there's like a small window of opportunity for a man to be vulnerable. And if it's compromised, it probably won't happen again. And so like, you know what I mean? So it's like, that's a painful reality. But my suggestion would be to like identify somebody who you feel you could be completely naked in front of. Mm-hmm. And take your time. So if you're like, yo, I feel hurt, like stay there, explore that. And then, eventually you get to other spaces, you get to other aspects of it, but, take your time with it.
I love that. Okay. As women, how can we create that safe space for men? Like, how can we make it easier for them to be able to, become spiritually naked and mentally naked in front of us?
That's a great question. I definitely think one of the things is like have no judgment and don't bring it up in terms of in arguments. You know what I mean? Like don't throw it back at him when he is in that vulnerable space, and also know that he is fragile. Know that he's a human being. He's a human being just like you with feelings, right? And understanding like you want your feelings to be validated, you want your feelings to be acknowledged. It's the same thing. You have to kind of reframe. I would say, I tell women like, you have to kind of reimagine how you viewed men. Like, I mean, yes, we are supposed to be pillars of strength, but look at strength differently. Strength is not the strong, solid type anymore. It's really more so the man who's able to handle his emotions and help you handle yours, right? And help handle each other's emotions. So like that's true strength. And so it's just like rebranding, redefining what that is for you, but also not being judgmental, because I think that has hindered so many marriages and so many relationships when men feel like they're being judged in their space of vulnerability and it's thrown back at them. And it's like they just check out.
Mm-hmm. You're absolutely right. I love that. And we're going to dive into relationships. But before I do, can you tell me, what is your take on masculinity? What does that mean to you?
Oh, wow. That's a very good question. Masculinity is, to me, like, it's like responsibility. I think it's the same thing for femininity. Just being responsible and of what it means to be masculine, to be a man, to stand in power, to not be ashamed of, being a man, not be ashamed of the male experience, but also having grace, also being kind to oneself. Yeah, I think it's being responsible for how you show up in the world, and how you treat others, and how you love, and how you handle things, and how you stand in your power. And everybody has power. I want to make sure that's clear. But standing in your power, everybody standing in your power, standing in who you are, with grace and with tenderness.
I love that, with grace and tenderness. That's so beautiful. Okay, so let's dive into relationships. You mentioned that relationships need to be interdependent and
Yes.
not codependent. Can you
Yes.
elaborate on the difference?
Well, so codependence. So why interdependence is so powerful? Because I believe the best thing that you can offer a relationship is having your own life, and being your own individual, being your whole self, right? And what interdependence is, it's like, I'm still this individual, I'm still this independent entity and being, but I am depending upon you as relationships, as you know what I mean? Like when I'm still growing, and we can grow together. I'm growing as an individual, and we're growing together as a unit. That's what interdependence means. Codependency means that my life revolves around you, and I can't function, I can't grow, I can't do anything without you. And that's very negative, and that's very extreme. It's like not having, it's enmeshment, honestly, which is like having your identity gets intertwined into another person. And so like that is a very dangerous space. So like I can't function unless you're here. And so that's the danger. That's the difference.
I love that. So it's like being there for each other, but also having your autonomous identity.
Yes.
But I've noticed that for some people, having an autonomous identity in a relationship can trigger insecurity. Like, have you noticed that? Have you seen that in your session?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think sometimes it also can trigger jealousy, right? Because the person, I have a couples client where she gets jealous of the way that he handles his self-care, how he makes time for himself to engage in self-care, the things that he does to take care of himself. And I said, but you can't be upset or jealous about that. And she even admitted, she said, I know that I shouldn't, but I think we had a wrong definition of what relationships were. You know what I mean? And think about it, at the time growing up, our parents, our grandparents, a lot of times women didn't have the autonomy that they have today. And so like, as time changed, we had to kind of like evolve in how we handle relationships in some aspects. You have to have your own life. You have to have your own identity. Otherwise you become enmeshed and you lose who you are. And so many people lose who they are in relationships. And then that becomes resentment, right? And so like, that's the thing. So that's why I think the most successful relationships that are out there today are comprised of individuals who know who they are. They work through their issues for the most part, and they have their own identity. And then they know how to come together and form a true partnership, rather than I need you my life doesn't stop. My life is going to stop if you're not in it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think interdependence has a lot more freedom in it than the narrative that we've been given. Like, oh, you gotta, when it's like, no, you're a complement to my life. You don't complete my life.
Exactly. And I was just going to say, it's so much pressure to tell someone, you need to complete me. You need to be my source of happiness. You need to be everything for me all the time.
Right.
It's a lot of pressure.
That's a lot of pressure on them and yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because it's like you're asking them to be something that they cannot be. Like, happiness is an inside job, right? And so that has nothing to do with anybody in your life. And I think that's a frightening thing for a lot of us, because that means, oh shoot, I got to do more self-work. I got to dig deep. I got to look inside. And I think that's why we cling to relationships so much, because we feel like that person is going to handle the work that we need to do ourselves.
Yeah, sometimes I've seen this, like people enter into a relationship because they want their pain to go away. They want to, finally feel X, Y, and Z, and then they get into a relationship and I was reading this article that one of the professors at Yale University gave out, and she was saying that, couples that are married are only happier the first 2 years of marriage. And then their level of happiness becomes the same as unmarried people. And that's because marriage doesn't make you happy. It has nothing, your happiness has nothing to do with being married. So it's so crazy.
Yeah. And that's a very, and it's funny, that statement she made is very, very accurate for a lot of couples. Sometimes some couples start off rough and then it gets better in the end. But most couples typically start off in that state of bliss. And then it transforms into, okay, I got to be my own individual. I got to find my own happiness. Yeah, that's true.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. Okay. Share with us some of your tips for a healthy relationship.
Definitely, first and foremost, is a safe space. You have to be a safe space. You have to create a safe space. And safe space, I mean, like, there is no violation of trust, meaning like you cannot bring it up, what is shared, the vulnerability that is shared, and throw it in each other's face. That's very, very important. Next thing is listen to understand, then you don't have to listen to be understood. If you listen to understand, we don't have to listen to be understood. So when you listen to understand, it gratifies the relationship. When you listen to be understood, it gratifies only you, right? And so when it comes to relationships, you have to look at, it has to be us, not I, right? So listening, listen for understanding. The next thing is having empathy and compassion. Empathy is like the first step, and then it's compassion. Compassion compels you to move, to action, right? Compassion is about action. Empathy with action is compassion. Oh, I like that. Empathy with action is compassion. I'm going to write that down. Empathy with action is compassion. So definitely having compassion and having intimacy. I encourage a lot of my married couples to have sex often, because that always rebonds, that always recreates the bond, the initial bond, right, when they got married. But also intimacy, like making sure that you guys are not just sex, but that you are really in that space of like the fragile you, the most part of you that the most people won't ever get to see. Make sure that you engaging in that space or partner often, right? Because that's important. And the friendship aspect, you have to be friends. You have to be friends in a relationship. There has to be a friendship component. And if it's just lovers, if it's just convenience, if it's just, business at that point, that's going to eventually die down. The thing that's going to undergird the relationship will be the friendship, because friendship is the most powerful thing we actually can have. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, because you choose is analogous to marriage, because you choose your friends. So I definitely say having friendship, developing a friendship in that relationship is very, very important. And be willing to be wrong. Be willing to be wrong. I think because of how life is set up for many of us, we're always on the defense. And so we're always ready to defend ourselves. We're always ready, you know what I mean? Like, we're always ready to, like, this is what you know what I mean? Like, you always want to protect yourself. You always want to do that. In a relationship, you should not have to feel that way. And so be willing to be wrong. Like, be willing to say, you know what? I'm not going to engage in this argument. I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole today. I'm going to be wrong, or I'm going to choose to not believe the narrative that I believed about other things. Like, people are out to get me, or, just whatever that wrong is. Wrong is such a broad spectrum, but be willing to be wrong. Like, be willing to say, like, you know what? I messed up. I'm wrong. Or, whatever it is. Like, I just think there's a space that you have to be willing to be wrong. You have to relinquish some of your rights in terms of, like, defending yourself, in terms of, like, this person is not the enemy. Mm-hmm. Ideally, they're not the enemy. Ideally. I agree. And these are always, and I'm speaking in ideal situations, obviously. But you got to be willing to be wrong. You got to be willing to reduce that ego. That's what I mean, ultimately, reduce the ego. Yeah, I can go on and on.
I love the last one, be willing to be wrong, because I was reading this book by Monica Berg, Rethink Love. And in her last chapter, she was saying that, people enter into a marriage And then when something goes wrong, they go like, why is he treating me this way? I'm such a perfect wife. And then she's like, how could you possibly be a perfect wife if this is your first time being in a marriage? It takes time to master anything in life. And that same logic applies to marriage. So how can you claim to be a master of something that you just entered? So it's okay to be like, I don't know everything and I'm just figuring it out. And if both parties enter into the relationship or into the marriage with that like mindset that it's okay if we, mess up as long as we're both learning and growing together.
Exactly.
Not thinking to be the know-it-all at the beginning. It would be so much better.
And that's a struggle for me because, I have a mentor in my life. His name is LeJure Glasper, and he always says being right is overrated.
Mm-hmm.
And he's right. It is overrated because in being wrong, to your point, what you just stated, you get to grow. You get an opportunity to connect deeper. So if you get something wrong, it's an opportunity for you guys the bond to even get deeper, for you to grow together and learn and have more wisdom and have more experience. And I always tell people this: what you do in your relationships, with the skills you learn in your relationships, you can transfer them into business. You can transfer them into anything. So it's like, that's a gold mine. Relationships are a gold mine for business. Like if you can master relationships, you can definitely be successful in business.
Yes, I love that. Okay, last question. What's your biggest no in a relationship?
My biggest no in a relationship. Oh my gosh. So it's two things for me. I have a list, but the two that just came up for me now are a person who's cheap. So I don't like a cheap woman. I don't like somebody who's cheap and stingy, who's not giving, because that bothers me. And I don't like a person who's not kind. Now, nice is different than kind. Kind is like, you're not always in the best mood, but you're still going to treat a person with grace and tenderness, regardless. You know what I mean? Because kindness is really more about the heart. Nice is more about the front we show to the world, the veneer. Right. But kindness is really deep rooted in your soul. So a person who is unkind, a woman who's very stingy. Those are no-nos for me.
Wow, I love that. And I think both of them tie into like having a scarcity mindset, right? Like not being in the state of flow of abundance of love and prosperity and all of that.
Because love is abundant. Love is abundant, right? To your point, love is abundant. And that's so funny that you said it like that, because I probably, if I had more time to think about it, I would have said it like that, a person who has a lack mindset, because that disturbs me more than anything. Because if you have abundance, then you know that there's love and we can grow, we can get through this, right? If you have an abundant mindset, we can make it through anything. But if you have that lack,
yeah, so true. Thank you so much for sharing all that wisdom with us. And hopefully if there's any men listening, it's safe to tap into your emotions and to feel it. And if you find someone that you can trust and who doesn't judge you, then feel free to, share those emotions. And it's okay. It's okay to have emotions, men.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And truthfully, like if you look at the suicide rates, if you look at the heart attacks, the high blood pressure, the depression rates in men, it's like, it's time for us to really shift the narrative of what it has been in terms of masculinity and manhood. Like that is very masculine to deal with your emotions. It's very masculine to deal with your mental health. Very much a masculine thing to do.
I love it. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Speak soon. Thank you for joining us this week on Minutes on Growth. If you enjoyed today's episode, then make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now.